Yes, welcome back. We're with Kevin Annett, who is the field secretary of the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. Welcome, Kevin.
Hello, Alfred.
Well, you're back now in Vancouver and it's been some time since our last update, and there's been quite a bit that's been happening. I know that you've mentioned some of the common law court of justice actions that are coming up, the first starting in New York. Could you tell us a bit about those?
Well, for your viewers, I mean, you probably know a lot of the background, but the International Common Law Court of Justice has convened and successfully tried its first case involving genocide in Canada. And on the basis of that, would not only have local common law courts sprung up in a number of countries, and I'll mention that in a minute, but there's been such a response to what we're doing that it was decided that over the next few months and starting in the new year of 2014, we would launch 2 new common law court cases. Now, these are global cases, not involving simply issues within a particular region or country, but issues that involve people across borders. And the first one, for example, having to do with the policies of deliberate genocide inflicted against Indigenous people by the Vatican and the Crown of England, and not only in Canada, but America and other countries. The second and third cases were decided to launch involve, first of all, the whole issue of child trafficking both within the government systems of so-called child protection, but also within church-sponsored agencies like Catholic orphanages, which you often find is a major source of, where children are abducted and used in this really global child trafficking system. The third case being that involving the crimes of Jorge Bergoglio, the present Pope Francis. Now, the second, or rather, this other case having to do with Pope Francis is very important because Francis is becoming, as we're going to talk about, a real world player in politics. He's posing as a real reformer within the Vatican. He's convinced a lot of people that he's sincerely trying to change the policies of the Vatican involving child abuse, human rights, and other things. Of course, as we've described, it's a real ruse, and in fact, he's tightening all the policies that criminalize the reporting of child abuse. You can go to jail now if you're an honest Catholic priest and report child abuse under these new policies Bergoglio has brought in. So what we're doing is we want to pull back the mask on this man and what he represents, and we are focusing on the hard evidence that's being brought forward about his role in assisting the military junta in Argentina during the dirty wars in the 1970s and 80s. It's interesting that one of the 2 priests in Argentina who were intimately connected with Bergoglio, who knew about his involvement in these crimes, one of them has in fact disappeared, according to our sources in Mexico. And we figure because of that, it's very important now to bring out the evidence we have on this while we still have it. And those are 2 of the cases then about child trafficking, about the guilt of the present Pope in crimes against humanity that we want to launch in the coming year.
Right, right. Now, while we're still on the subjects of the popes, you've brought forth new evidence regarding Pope Ratzinger,
right,
and a survivor of ritual abuse. I wonder if you could speak about that.
Right. Well, as people know, Joseph Ratzinger and Pope Benedict stepped down, the first pope in peacetime ever to have done that. And he did that the same month that our verdict came in the common law court last February. He stepped down, as did his Secretary of State, Tarcisio Bertone, both of them named in the indictment in our common law court about genocide in Canada. They both stepped down while in office because they knew that there were arrest warrants being prepared for them. There are still standing arrest warrants against both of them and other individuals. And because of that fact, it really has caused over the last number of months a number of people to sit up and take interest, including insiders who have intimate knowledge of the role of Joseph Ratzinger in horrible crimes. Now, Toos Nijenhuis is a Dutch woman. Last May 8th, we posted an interview with her, a 2.5-hour interview, where she claimed to have seen Joseph Ratzinger, Prince Bernhard of Holland, the founder of the Bilderberger Group, and other individuals involved in satanic ritual and murder and torture of children in Holland and France and a number of other locations. A second individual has come forward over the last couple of months to affirm this. A woman who I interviewed in New York City, who says that she was a member of an intergenerational satanic cult. So these are families highly connected to powerful political and religious groups, in this case the Catholic Church. And she says that she witnessed Joseph Ratzinger take part in the ritual murder, rape, and killing of a young 9-year-old girl at a French chateau in 1987. Now that agreed with what Toos Nijenhuis had told us about having been taken to places in France, in Carnarvon Castle in Wales, and various other places where these horrible things went on involving the murder of children, the ritual slaying of children. Now, we have added this into the pool of evidence we have about Joseph Ratzinger. There is, like I mentioned, a standing arrest warrant on him because he's already been found guilty for ordering, among other things, ordering bishops around the world to hide evidence of child rape and other crimes against them. Clearly now that cover-up ordered by Ratzinger was to cover himself personally as well, is what we believe now.
Now, Ratzinger remains resident and based in the Vatican.
Right.
What sort of a working relationship is there between Bergoglio and Ratzinger, Pope Francis and former Pope Benedict?
Well, it's direct and active. One thing we do know is that Bergoglio, the present Pope, was involved in making the arrangement whereby the Italian government would not extradite or seek the extradition of Ratzinger from Vatican City. And that wasn't simply to honor the so-called Lateran Treaty that exists between the Italian government and the Vatican. That was also a special intervention that Bergoglio made after becoming Pope. It's kind of like the first act Gerald Ford did was to pardon Richard Nixon, his predecessor. Same thing here. He made sure that Ratzinger would not be touched. And, that, again, is we believe, indicative that Bergoglio himself has a direct implication in these crimes. From things that people have been sharing with us from Latin America, the knowledge they have of Bergoglio's role, it wasn't simply to act as a public relations spokesman for the military junta, which he did actively. He was involved in, according to these priests and other sources, in the Catholic Church in Latin America, and this is being widely talked about all over the place now in the Latin American Church. Bergoglio played a direct role in, for example, obtaining Exocet missiles for the Argentine junta through his friend Roberto Calvi, the Vatican banker who was found hanging dead under Blackfriars Bridge in London, England, in 1982. He obtained the money from a loan from Calvi through the Vatican Bank to get these missiles for the junta. Bergoglio then went from being a priest to the head of the Argentine Church in about 12 years. He was also involved in a common practice in the Catholic Church of taking the children of political prisoners, and they did this under Franco in Spain. About 500,000 Spanish children were trafficked in this way. They did the same in Argentina. They took the children of political prisoners who were being tortured and killed in Argentine prisons and trafficked them and put them in the homes of loyal Catholic fascists, if you like, and they made a lot of money in the process. And this child trafficking is one of the definitions of genocide under international law, the crime of genocide. So, on many fronts, Bergoglio has his hands dirty, and I think that's why he has like I say, a personal interest in giving a facelift on the Vatican to cover up his own complicity.
So do you think that the roles that they're playing are kind of good cop, bad cop?
Yeah, very much. I mean, and many people who are even politically very sophisticated fall for this the oldest routine in the world, which is you so demonize a previous official that everyone automatically thinks, well, psychologically, the next guy who comes in has got to be better. especially when he's saying everything that people need to hear, which is what Bergoglio has been doing. You know, as the first Jesuit pope in history, don't forget what the Jesuits are. They're trained from the beginning. Historically, in the 16th century, they were trained in the art of dissimulation and subterfuge as part of the Counter-Reformation to destroy any political opponent of the Pope and the papacy. So he's just continuing to do this. But I think there's a broader purpose going on in this, and that is something I mentioned to you earlier, which is the political and financial axis. Excuse me. The axis developing between Rome and Beijing.
Right, right.
Excuse me.
Yeah, yeah. Do you need some water or?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Okay, so what exactly is the China Vatican axis?
Well, this is something that we began to learn about this year through various sources, including former World Bank officials who have gone public with some of this. Essentially, the Vatican and China are working to create a single world currency, and one of the reasons the Vatican is doing this is to solve their own financial crisis. They are attempting to basically dissolve the Vatican Bank, and they've transferred we figure in the last 6 months, over €500 million have been transferred out of the Vatican Bank into various banks in Europe, predominantly in Germany. But we've been told that those are simply a means of transferring them into, into the Chinese hands, because geopolitically, I think what the strategy is with all of the Catholics in the world combined with, the financial power and the psychological power of Rome with the Chinese population, they're creating an unbeatable bloc economically, politically, ideologically. And also they seem to now begin together with Vladimir Putin in Russia. So this is a new power bloc forming in the world, I believe. Also the thing about the what's happened in response to this stuff coming out is any group that seems to be pointing their fingers at the Jesuits, at Bergoglio, at any of this seems to be targeted. We've had, in just the last couple of months, 12 to 15 people who are very active with us taken out, either turned, so they become actively hostile against the work of our tribunal, the ITCCS, or simply drop out without any explanation. And clearly those people who were being targeted were those who were involved in, for example, exposing the stuff in Holland with the direct involvement of former popes in these child torture cults and the murder of children. And, as we mentioned earlier. So I think it isn't accidental that so much heat is coming down now as we expose these things.
Right. Now, let's get back to Putin and China for a second. From the point of view of Putin has now been determined by, the media that looks at these things to have displaced Obama as the world's #1 power player. Mm-hmm. And so the Pope and Putin are now going to meet. What do you see behind that?
Well, I think you're right. I think there's this new power bloc forming between Rome, China, and Russia. And it's very smart because they're going to be able to drag Europe with them. Orwell has come true. The 3 power blocks in 1984 exist. And Oceania, or America, is certainly the declining power, kind of comparable to the place England was in after World War II. They may have a lot of still the psychological and the military power, but it's on the decline. Financially, they're in ruins, and American politicians are actively, I believe, colluding with Chinese money to drive their own government into the ground. And there's been some evidence about the heavy Chinese investment behind both Republican and Democratic politicians who have been doing everything to sabotage the operations of the government in America. We all know how much Chinese money is being invested in Canada, in the Canadian resources, in buying up the debt in Canada and the United States. So yeah, definitely this is a rising global power system. And the Vatican is playing a big role in that. So this is, it does explain a lot of what's been going on, I believe.
Now, this is a supreme irony because one doesn't have to look back that long ago that communism and Catholicism were arch enemies. And here
Well,
you have the premier communist power, China, and the premier Catholic power, the Vatican, cozying up to each other. How do you resolve that contradiction?
well, I don't think there is a contradiction because ideology and politics and religion, that's all for the masses. That's, the official label. We know behind these labels that elites all operate the same way. Um, and in fact, when you look at the whole Jesuitical thinking behind Stalin and kind of Russian dictators, whether, post and pre-revolution, there really isn't any different. Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, they're all Jesuit-trained individuals, and they have the same view and contempt of humanity as the Vatican does. We are going to run humanity. We know what's best for them. They're all sheep, and it's the same ideology. So I don't see there being any contradiction at all. But what we're also seeing at the same time is a real shakeup in the whole Catholic system. There's bishops in America and Ireland and priests that we work with in Ireland who are openly talking about breaking away from Rome. They because they know what's going on behind the scenes. They know the mask is slipping in a big way, and the church as it was is definitely coming apart. So I think that the Vatican recognizes that, and they're realigning to create a new power bloc in the world to assure their assets, basically.
Now you mentioned among the large common law court cases that you're preparing for 2014 is one against Bergoglio, but also one in the child trafficking area. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, for example, in a group in Kitchener, Ontario, in Canada, is convening in mid-January a common law court to investigate child trafficking within what's called the Children's Aid Society. This is a private company paid by the Ontario government $100,000 for every child they apprehend and take out of their home. So it's a very lucrative for-profit child snatching industry. And Steve Finney, one of our organizers in Kitchener, and his wife Amy Smart have been doing a lot of work documenting this. Steve was put in prison for 3 days on trumped-up charges. We got him out after a lot of pressure we brought to bear. But in the course of it, it's pretty clear that the Ontario government, the police in Kitchener, judges and others are directly colluding in the abduction of these children and the trafficking. So this is one of the court cases that is going to be convened. They're already calling a jury together, a common law citizens jury, and a case is being presented. There'll be summonses issued hopefully during the new year. That's one case. Another in America, right on Long Island, I'm also helping to convene a case into the same issue. Frankly, Alfred, I would say 3/4 of the emails I'm getting having to do with people who want to start actions involve exactly this issue about child trafficking within church and state systems. It's rampant, and people are now finally feeling empowered to come forward. And it's really a snowball that's building, which I think accounts to a lot of the attacks that we and other tribunals have been facing as we go public with these things more and more.
Yeah. Could you talk a bit about the one that is being prepared in New York City?
Right. Okay. Well, in New York City, there's a lot of interest because we are developing contact with 2 NGOs, non-governmental organizations at the UN, who have shown interest in bringing forward a motion to have the Vatican actually expelled from as an observer status at the United Nations and have its diplomatic status revoked on the grounds that it's clearly a transnational criminal body. It launders money for the mafia, it traffics children, it hides crimes against humanity. So on that basis, they shouldn't have diplomatic status anywhere, let alone at the UN. These 2 NGO groups are actually convening a conference in the spring in New York City, where the need for a common law court investigation into how the Catholic Church is operating in America, its involvement, for example, in Monsanto and genetically modified organisms. The Vatican is a big actor in Monsanto, and so we're actually linking up with anti-GMO groups within New York City that have been trying to bring this as a common law case. So, because of its a special important status there at the United Nations, the this common law action in New York City is going to be a very important one, and we'll be having a lot more documented about that.
Right. So, how would you sum up 2013 so far, as far as the progress that the International Tribunal has made, and your objectives?
Well, it's been earth-shaking, Alfred. In February, we indicted, was the first common law court indictment in history of the Crown of England, Elizabeth Windsor, the Crown of England, and Joseph Ratzinger, the Pope Benedict, and the Vatican for crimes against humanity in Canada, including indicting and finding guilty Prime Minister Stephen Harper, the heads of the United Church, the Catholic and the Anglican churches in Canada. That was historic, that in itself. But then following on that, the actual issuing of citizen arrest warrants, the convening of common law courts to enforce these warrants and to educate citizens in Canada and other countries that we have the customary right and obligation to do this when the courts and the government are colluding with these crimes by these religious bodies. So it's been very historic, but it's also had enormous ripple effects in other countries. I mean, we went in 2010 when the ITCCS was formed in Dublin. There were 5 countries affiliated with it. Now there's 28. There's politicians now in Italy who have raised their heads in the last few months again and said they want to help us work in Italy to have the Lateran Treaty revoked, which will be astounding. It'll mean that the Vatican doesn't have that political and legal protection to operate in Italy anymore. So, I mean, there's a real shakeup happening. And, you know, it's all very encouraging, and it shows the power of citizens standing on the truth, how it can have an enormous effect once we do that persistently, not just once or twice, but continually.
And how can people keep in touch now with the work of the tribunal? How can they contact you? How can they become involved in your process?
Well, you can go to our website, which was sabotaged, but it's now back up online with even better stuff in it. Our website is www.itccs.org. And also hiddennolonger.com is our evidence of genocide in Canada. You can also write to me, Hidden from History 1, like number 1, hiddenfromhistory1@gmail.com. And in terms of the new year, I will be starting in Eastern Canada and the United States in the first part of the year. But probably by about March, April, I'll be back in Europe. We'll be holding various press conferences and gatherings in Italy and other countries to work with the political forces in Europe, in Italy, in Spain, in Holland, in Ireland, and other countries that are actually coming forward now and saying this is time for political action to unseat these genocidal, historic actors of genocide in Rome and other places. So I'm very positive the way that in the face of all of this opposition and attack, we continue to have people coming forward to help us, politicians coming out now. And one of the reasons for our continued existence is that a lot of the people who are involved on the ground in our work have not come out publicly. They have kept their anonymity and their safety because, as we've learned time and again, here in Canada, Aboriginal people who have come forward prematurely have been killed in the course of this work. They've been silenced, and we've learned our lesson about that. We've established a cloak of anonymity around the important witnesses and actors in this, and this has paid off. And so I just want to encourage people to contact us, itccs.org, and spread the information, learn about this, and start your own common law court cases.
Thank you. Well, we certainly appreciate your taking the time today to update us, and we look forward to your coming back again to update us as your work progresses.
Thank you, Alfred. We'll certainly keep you posted very soon.
Thank you.